There's sufficient evidence to make a finding that Americans were transferred from Korea to either China or the Soviet Union?
Apparently, yes. And it's time for you people to come up here and accept that evidence and begin to move to the next step, which is to find out what happened to these people and where they are.
It's a tremendous shame for any country to think that they left its people behind.
In 1982, a federal court judge delivered an unprecedented ruling ordering the U.S. Army to reclassify Corporal Roger Dumas from missing presumed dead to prisoner of war. His brother Bob's legal team had proven that Roger was known to be alive in North Korea POW Camp No. 5 when the armistice was signed, although he and others were not released from Freedom Village during Operation Big Switch. The U.S. government denied Roger was ever a POW, and denied he and others were knowingly withheld by the North Koreans, just as hundreds of South Korean soldiers were also left behind. However, South Korea has always acknowledged this tragedy and has continually worked to get these men released. The U.S. government decided the public should never know POWs were left behind, and to this day does not acknowledge their abandonment nor seek their release.
Also testifying before the Senate Select Committee was retired Army Colonel Philip Corso, a former member of the National Security Council who served as President Eisenhower's POW MIA liaison. Colonel Corso dropped a bomb that stunned and angered Senate committee members when he admitted that President Eisenhower approved the recommendation to leave the POWs behind.
I want to get this record straight on exactly what happened.
Okay.
I was the only one left that was actually there. I know what happened, and I will tell you what happened without any speculation. The president was in the Oval Office, the three of us, and I saluted him, and he said, I understand you have a report on prisoners of war going to the Soviet Union. I told him, yes, that's what I'm here for. That close to 1,200 that we suspect, but about 900 certain that did go there. Our information is solid.
He made a very direct statement, twice under oath. Eisenhower made the decision. He was told specifically these men were abandoned. We knew they'd been moved over there, and yes, it'll be very difficult to get them back.
That was the recommendation that he accepted and said not to tell the families at the time.
This secret 1954 memorandum from the top U.S. Air Force general to the CIA stated, "An unknown but apparently substantial number of U.S. military personnel captured in the course of the Korean War are still being held prisoners by the Communist forces. It is therefore requested that requirements be placed on appropriate operating organizations for clandestine and covert action to locate, identify, and recover those U.S. prisoners of war still in Communist custody." Unfortunately, this directive was never carried out. One of the key reasons a peace treaty was never signed officially ending the Korean War is because the repatriation of POWs could not be resolved. Therefore, North Korea withheld U.S. and South Korean POWs, as the United States allowed North Korean and Chinese POWs to defect. In 1992, Senate hearings resulted in the creation of the Pentagon's POW MIA Office, DPMO. Its official function is to find and secure the remains of servicemen killed in battle. Its unofficial function is to deny any Americans were abandoned in any war and to debunk any live sighting reports. Today, the office, now known as DPAA, assures all those who inquire, especially members of Congress and the press, that no POWs were left behind. But one Pentagon analyst disagreed and submitted a report that contradicted the official Defense Department position on POW MIAs in North Korea.
Pentagon analyst In-Sung Lee distributed an internal report in 1996 documenting credible intelligence reports and his personal interviews with eyewitnesses of live American POWs in North Korea.
In-Sung Lee's efforts were far more impressive and meaningful in terms of, there are between 10 and 16 or whatever it is, people that he believes are there, possibly as many as 100. And maybe it's because of the tremendous credibility of his efforts getting over there, talking to people, reading, speaking the language, That's why he's possibly been reassigned out of the POW-MIA area.
In his report, In Sung Lee states, "There are too many live sighting reports of Americans in North Korea to dismiss that there are no American POWs still being held against their will."
North Korea did not return a large number of American servicemen at the end of the war, and that some of the men left behind were sent to Communist China and to the Soviet Union. Internal documents and statements made at the time also show that our government believed that men were still alive in captivity, and until only a few months ago has kept that reality from the American people. It has covered up what it knew through a pattern of denial, misleading statements, in some cases lies, and by doing so with regard to the Korean conflict, it broke its commitment with the people who put on the uniform to fight for the freedoms and protection that we and our allies enjoy today.
Oh, we went back to get Jessica Lynch because America never leaves a man behind. That is poison to us who know this issue, because it just isn't true.
My understanding is that U.S. policy says that none were left behind. And they've said that with respect to World War II, with respect to Korea, and with respect to Vietnam. And since none were left behind, none are there. And that is the official policy. And the corollary there is we won't find any alive, so you don't bother looking, really.
And now I think the current question is, and the question that remains to this day and implicates the people that are running the government today, is why do we persist in keeping that a secret?
You know, what's wrong with saying, okay, we really screwed up? Because you already know it anyway, so all we're doing is legitimizing it.
They've lied about everything since 1953. What difference does it make?
What happens is, for one reason or another, they realize it wasn't the best decision, and rather than admit that they made a mistake, which would then create the transparency in government that is necessary, they try to hide it. And then by hiding it, they compound the problem, because in order to hide it, they have to lie some more, and it just becomes one snowball of lying.
It exposes the fact that we've covered it all up. It exposes the equally bad crime of our political leaders in looking the other way when they abandoned these men, knowing precisely what was going to be happening to them. As Phil Chenery says in his book, Korean Atrocities, that was the greatest atrocity of all.
Now, suppose this had gotten out to the American people. There'd have been such a hue and cry about that. Why did we leave our sons over there to go through that hell for the rest of their life?
You know, that would be devastating to people. We would have to rewrite history.
I think it's safe for the American government to find remains of POWs because the remains cannot talk or show anger.
Remains are important. I'm not discrediting that. But I feel that we should be also or primarily asking about live Americans in North Korea.
No, actually the pursuit of live Americans is our #1 priority, ahead of that of pursuing the recovery of remains. Several reasons, of course. There may be lives at stake.
They have never admitted that there are live Americans in North Korea.
We need to be careful that what some people might call a prisoner of war, other people would call defectors.
They always say that, yes, those are the men that defected.
Obviously, the United States government's policy is to bring Americans home, to account for them if they're POWs.
Colonel Joe Schlater, November 9, 1989. There is no evidence to suggest that any U.S. personnel were not released from captivity in Korea. Now that's just, I mean, I just don't understand people in responsible positions coming up here to the Hill and saying that kind of thing. And I don't want to dispute it because I've been through that for 8 years with you people. I don't have desire to dispute it. As I said in my opening statement, the facts speak for themselves, the evidence speaks for themselves, and it's time for you people to come up here and accept that evidence and begin to move to the next step, which is to find out what happened to these people and where they are. That's what we've got to start doing. So why don't you just admit that you've got the evidence? I know for a fact that from my perspective, the job was not done. We didn't finish the investigation. I can tell you that I'm 99.9% certain that there were live Americans in North Korea when I was there.
In 2012, then Senator Richard Lugar, ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, wrote a letter to Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta. Actual contact between U.S. and North Korean military officials will also provide clear opportunity to inquire as to whether American service personnel missing from the Korean War, involuntarily imprisoned or otherwise, remain in North Korea. This is especially relevant as South Korean military personnel continue to be forcibly detained in North Korea from the Korean War. Senator Lugar's efforts were thwarted when he lost his re-election bid in 2013. In 2018, President Trump became the first American president to meet with the leader of North Korea. And still, neither the U.S. government nor the media acknowledge the abandoned Korean War POWs. Only the return of remains is addressed. But the evidence is clear. American POWs were left behind, and it's likely some are still alive in North Korea, just as South Korean POWs are known to be alive and which the South Korean government acknowledges. We owe it to our POW MIAs to never stop looking for them, and we make this appeal to President Trump. Before a peace treaty with North Korea can be signed, there must be a full accounting of all POW MIAs who were not released at the end of the war. The ongoing denial by our government of these forgotten servicemen must stop now. Just as the South Korean government acknowledges and works for the release of their POWs still being held in the DPRK, the U.S. government must do the same. You were elected to effect change, and to date you have shown decisiveness in your actions. Please demonstrate more courage and do what no other president since the armistice signing has done. Acknowledge that American servicemen were left behind in Korea. As a family member of one of those servicemen left behind, Corporal Roger A. Dumas, we need answers from the North Koreans. Please watch the award-winning documentary film, Missing Presumed Dead, The Search for America's POWs, and see the evidence of live POWs researched by journalist Mark Sauter and a distinguished team of military and POW MIA experts.